Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah, I haven't had a video since the last YouTube game that I played, and there's some reasons for that. I mean, there's been some things going on in my personal life that I had to take care of, but also as far as building and playing games, I haven't had time to play any because I've been helping out getting mostly Global War 1914 ready, but also helping out with some of the other ones in smaller ways. And Doug has us all busy with questions. He's always putting out questions to us. Which marker do you like better? What do you think of these task force things or something like that, right? And so we all weigh in if we have an opinion or whatever. So like there's always lots to do. But anyway, this video that I'm gonna do today, this is going to be about Global War 1914, and the reason that it's coming out now is because I don't know if you noticed or not, but just a couple of days ago, Doug put Global War 1914 on the website. Not for sale yet, but we'll talk about that. So what you do, like here's the website, and you just go to Global War and 1914. And now if you go to the game, there's nothing but a picture of the game, right? It's not for sale yet. But if you go to downloads, that's where you'll see there's a whole list of things here. And so the game is done. It's completely done. There's only one thing left to do, and that's the random events. We're about 98% done on those, but we had some things to take care of recently. The people that are going through the random events on the final editing process, and so that should be done in the next week or so. But we're at the production phase now where things are getting done. Like most of the reference sheets are, for the most part, done. But the reason that things are put on the website like this is so that you can go through them. Like here's the rules. Obviously the rules aren't made pretty yet, right? So what we would like you guys to do, if you want, if you don't have time, then that's fine too. But for those of you who want to do it though, you can go through all of the rules and don't just look for spelling or grammar mistakes, although do that too. But make sure that you understand everything in here, right? Like if you read something, well, what does that mean? No problem. Just send Doug an email and ask him the question, and then he'll forward that question on to the rest of us, and we'll get that question either answered for you, or more likely what we'll do is we'll clarify in the rules. So I guess we could have worded that better or something like that, right? So anyway, that's why we put this stuff on the website. One of the things that you might find interesting in there is the game designer notes, and this talks about the process that we went through. And I tell you, this has been a long time coming. This game has been in the works for, geez, I'm going to say 6 years, maybe more. I've been involved in it for 4 years, I think, and it's a huge process. Like you think, well, all you got to do is just make some rules and draw up a map and a few player aids, and away you go, right? But that's not how they do things at historical board gaming, right? Like everything has to be accurate. Like all the bases, naval bases and things like that on the board. You can't put a naval base on the board unless one actually existed, right? And you have to be able to show it. You have to show Doug, where you found in literature that naval base existed, right? Like I did some work on seaplanes because I thought seaplanes were underrepresented in the 36 game. Plus I was working on the 14 game. And so I spent, I don't know how many hours, like dozens of hours, poring over stuff. I became a semi-expert in seaplanes and seaplane bases. But you know what? Like if a seaplane base was built in 1937, We weren't allowed to put it on the board for the 1936 setup. He will not allow that, right? And you know, like I know that there's been some discussion since the V4 rules come out about how seaplanes, people talked about how they thought that it would be different or whatever. But the thing is, seaplanes were what they were. You can't make them into something that they weren't just to satisfy a game mechanic, right? Um, they were really big in the First World War because they're and probably their heyday would have been in the interwar period between the First and the Second World War. That was really the only transatlantic flights or transocean flights of any kind. Um, you couldn't fly a normal plane that far across an ocean, but you could fly a seaplane that far. Not across the Pacific Ocean, of course. You still had to island hop for that. But the other thing was there was no airports, right? Hardly any airports anywhere. So when the Second World War started, they relied on seaplanes heavily, even though they were big and lunky and you know they didn't fight very well. They were the best thing, even by the end, just about near the end of the war, for hunting down submarines because they had the greatest range. You couldn't just fly out to a sea zone and say, "Hey, there's a sub." Like you had to fly in a grid pattern, right? Like you had to search for them, and so you needed something that could fly a long ways. And so they weren't great for killing things, but they were great for hunting things, right? And you know, like so they had their uses. And in the 1914 game, you'll find that they're much more useful than they are in the 36 game, just because they're not competing with a bunch of other planes. Like fighters in the 1914 game don't shoot at the beginning of the game. In 1914, they had no guns, right? They were there strictly for observation. But anyway, that's you know like that's why it took so long to build this game, is because everything had to be historically accurate. So here's one of the reference sheets here. This is the British reference sheet. So it gives you a bit of information. So it tells you what territories are in their home country, and that's the same basically as the 36 game. It talks about the special rules for the British Empire. There's the declaration of war penalty. That's similar to the declaration of war penalty that you find in the 36 game. But there's also mandatory offensives, and that's something that Britain, France, and Germany have. Because that was historically accurate in World War One. Like you'll find in the 14 game that you don't really want to attack somebody's trench line, right? Until you build up more, but doesn't matter. Like if you're going to suffer penalties, like really tough penalties, if you don't make an offensive in Europe as one of those three nations, because they did. They attacked anyway. They said no. Men are men and we have guns, and so we're supposed to attack, and they'd attack even though they knew it wasn't a good idea, right? You still had to do it. So that's in there. It talks about Britain and like all the different aspects of them. So in 1912 is very, very small income, because if you're playing the prequel, you don't move your units around in the prequel unless you're playing on one of the mini maps. There's a couple of mini maps. There's a Mexican Civil War, and then there's a couple of Balkan Wars, and they're both played on the same mini map. It's basically the Balkans expanded. So if you're then leasing to one of those or you're playing on it, then you can move those pieces, but only the ones that you're using to fight with, right? And you can move your ships around as well, but we're not going to allow you to move your ground units around, because all that would happen is, you know, after you played the game once, then you know what's going to happen. So you're just going to move all your units by the time 1914 comes around and the war starts, and you'll have these huge trench lines that are already built, and nobody's going to go anywhere. So and plus, you know, like that's just not what happened at the beginning of World War One. They didn't know that the war was going to start. I mean, tensions were rising, and they thought they might go to war, but they didn't know they were going to meet where they met, and and start the war like they did, right? So you're not going to move your pieces around in the prequel, and so you're going to get a lot less money. And then once 1914 comes around, then your income goes way up, and and like here, diplomatic income. If you can trace a supply path to Germany for the British, then you're going to get an extra dollar for Greece, right? As long as Greece is still in play, like somebody else hasn't taken it, right? And that could happen in the Balkan Wars, but probably less likely for that to happen. It tells you who your aligned majors are at the start of the game and who your aligned minors will be, like the nations that'll align to you without rolling any dice, like those will just become yours. That's assuming, though, that you're making your mandatory offensives, because if you don't make your mandatory offensives, then you don't get your aligned minors that turn, right? And when you have to make one, then it's for the year, and a year lasts 3 turns. So as long as you make one mandatory offensive that year, then you don't suffer a penalty, right? And tells you what happens if you surrender. Now, there's also your elite infantry. Everybody but the Russians get an elite infantry unit. With the British, it's the Gurkha, the same as the 36. With the Russians, they have Cossacks, and it's a cavalry unit. But everybody else has some type of infantry unit. These are where your technologies are to begin the 1914 scenario. So like you can also just place your pie on the technology chart at stage 2, or 2 different technologies at stage 1. Because you find if you play the prequel, there's a lot of turns there. Remember, I think there's 7 turns in the prequel. Like, you'll do a lot of rolling, and so we found that when we did one version of the game versus the other, that in the 1912 version of the game, they had a lot more technology, and that was why. So we decided in the 1914 game that, and I think this is all of the major powers have something like this, where they're going to get a little bit of extra technology to start the game. And then you've got your objectives and your points, right? Those are similar to the 36 game, although different objectives, right? And then the last thing is the setup charts. And you'll see that we've done the setup charts here differently. This is the 1912 setup, and here's the 1914 setup. So the one thing why we set it up like this is so you can look along the top here. They have 4 militia, 12 colonial troops, 15 infantry, 10 torpedo boat destroyers. So if you take 10 torpedo boat destroyers out of your box and put them on the map, and then, okay, where do they go? Then you'll know, okay, well, I have 1 torpedo boat destroyer left over. What am I missing? It's just, it helps you to get the right amount of pieces on the board, right? If you know exactly how many you should start with, then you just have to figure out where they go, right? So anyway, there's that. And then we have a bunch of reference sheets that are on there. And you'll go through all of these, like if you can find mistakes, great, let us know. So there's the technology. Now, technology is really, really big in this game, because this is a war that went from the old world to the new world, right? This was at the beginning of the 20th century. Before this war happened, like, they still met in fields. You know what I mean? The big fields. Okay, we'll meet at dawn, and and then we'll all blow our trumpets, and then we'll attack each other, right? That lasted about 5 minutes in this war, until they figured out that putting a whole bunch of machine guns on the field at the same time was a recipe for let's dig a bunch of trenches. So then trench warfare began right then and there, impromptu like, and next thing you know, there were miles and miles of trenches everywhere, right? But it was the very beginning of the new world, and like, planes were just invented. Hardly anybody had ever been in an airplane before this war started. The internal combustion engine was just invented. So this war kickstarted technology big time, right? Invention is, or what is that? necessity is the mother of invention, right? So they needed these technologies in order to fight this war, and so they spent a lot of money and put a lot of effort into them. And you're going to need to win this game as well. Like you're going to find with the trenches, you'll get frustrated at first, but the more we played it and the more we tweaked it, we found that if you embrace these technologies and you get just the right combination of them and do it in just the right way, and don't get diced. I mean, if you're going to get diced, then there's not much you can do. But so you need a pretty fair dice. But you can break trench lines, but you can't just do it just pounding the other guy with just infantry and artillery. It's just not going to work, because trenches give you a huge advantage to the defender, right? So you're going to need your tanks, you're going to need your poison gas, you're going to need things like that, right? And you'll just find the right combination of stuff. I could tell you what those are, but I would rather you discover them for yourself. Besides, I don't, like I don't know that we found the best way, right? Now you'll see that like I wouldn't download these things and make them all pretty or anything, because like you see here, these are all purple, right? That's because I think that I'm pretty sure Doug is redoing the terrain. Like the mountains aren't going to look like mountains in the next version, or deserts or jungles, or maybe some of them will, some of them won't. I just know that he's changing what some of the terrain looks like on the map, and the map isn't quite finished, and so that's why these haven't been filled in yet. But there'll be pictures of all the different terrains in them, right? So anyway, there's a lot of these reference sheets in there. There's the unit reference. You notice here we've got camels in the game, so you'll see a little bit more fighting in the deserts, for instance. There's colonial troops. Now that's something new for this game, and things are different in this game. Like the militia and the colonial troops, you look at the numbers here, they're basically the same thing. They're identical in numbers, but the difference is militia is in your home country. Colonial troops are troops that you have that are not in your home country. But they do move and they do attack, although not very well, right? Plus you can build a colonial troop. Let's say you're Germany, you can build a colonial troop down in Africa. And then if you have a supply path to that colonial troop, on the following turn you can upgrade it to a regular infantry. So in the end it'll cost you 4 IPP, which is the same cost of buying a colonial infantry in the 36 game. But like you look at the infantry, 2, 4, move 1, and cost 3. So a lot of the units in this game are very similar to the units in the 14 game or the 36 game. One unit that is vastly different is a tank. Tanks are almost completely useless in this game, except against a trench line. Like you have to have an open field basically to use a tank. They don't move at all in mountains or anything, right? So putting a tank in a mountain, like the only way it moves through a mountain is on a train. If you put it on a train. Artillery is going to be your hitter in this game. Artillery and heavy artillery. Armored train, that's basically an artillery that moves on the rails. So that's a really good one, but also it costs a lot. You'll find you have less money in this game. The incomes are not as high as they are in the other game. And in case you haven't noticed, there's a lot of infantry class units like those. There's the 3 up here. And then down here, you've got your specialist infantry. Plus, you've got that extra specialist infantry that each nation has, the nation-specific one. That's because we wanted lots of units in this game, but you couldn't just make something up. Like we couldn't put tactical bombers in this game because they hadn't been invented yet, right? So there's a lot of different infantry units and, a couple of different artillery units. You've got your observation balloons, coastal artillery, mines, and then there's only 7 different boats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7 different boats, because of course you don't have your aircraft carriers, and there's only one type of cruiser, right? Your torpedo boat destroyer, you look at the numbers there. That's a lot like a regular destroyer in the 36 game. And the subs and the coastal subs are very similar to the 36 game as well and the transports. The Dreadnought is a battleship. Pre-Dreadnought, that'd be like a coastal defense ship. 7-7, only moves 1. You know what I mean? Fighters, like I said, they don't shoot to begin the game. So that would be a 1914 fighter. Doesn't have any attack or defense. 1916 fighter tells you that you can do dogfighting and the observation. 17, your fighters, dogfighting, interception, ground strike. So as you move along in time, your fighters get better. So that'll happen automatically in these years. Or you could roll the dice on the technology chart, and in 1916 you could be the only guy on the board with a 1917 fighter, right? Or you can just wait till 1917 and they will automatically upgrade. And then you've got your strategic bombers and your seaplanes again. They don't go quite as far, like they only go 4 in this game because, of course, they're older technology, right? And then the Zeppelins and the airships are the same thing. It's just the Zeppelins, the German ones, has 1 to 4, whereas the airships are 1 to 3 for everybody else, right? So those are the units in the game. And then there's an alignment reference sheet. It just, like it helps you out. The Japanese, the Italian, the Russian collapse, the Chinese entry. China is vastly different in this game, and it's vastly different than it was a year ago in this game. Here, let's just get rid of this computer now. I'm not going to show you any more of that. Let's just start taking a look at some little plastic army men. So China in this game, this is the 1936 map, by the way, so you're not getting any sneak peeks or anything. One of the things that was really difficult for us was that we were trying to make it a global game. All of the global war games have to be global games. They can't just be a European game. And World War I was mostly a European war. There was some colonial fighting down in Africa, and there was a bit of fighting out in the Atlantic. But there was skirmishes and stuff. There was stuff going on on the Pacific side, but there wasn't really a big part of the war. But one of the things that did happen, and I'm only going to touch on this briefly, like I'll do another video later on about this. One of the most impactful things that happened in the early part of the 20th century was that the last emperor of China abdicated in 1911. That's only a year before our game starts here, and yet we were kind of like, we had a few random events that but what we found was nothing was happening in China because we had all these random events that didn't really make anything happen there other than neutering China. But so we came up with something. Now, there was a period of time called the Warlord era in China, and that was in the wake of the last emperor abdicating, where there was the nationalists, and that's who became the KMT in the end. They tried to unite the country, and then of course you had all your different warlords, and they were just basically in it for themselves. I'm really simplifying things here, right? So what we have in our game here is that the nationalists are going to try to take over as much territory as they can in China. They've got to take out as many warlords as they can. And China will be controlled by the American player, and the warlords will be controlled by, like you can do it with the Austrian player, or you can do it with the Ottoman player. Maybe there's only 2 people in the game, so it's the central power. Basically, the central powers are going to run the warlords, and so you will get points for that, because there wasn't many points over here in Asia. Like, we were just whatever, we weren't doing much over here. But this, it's basically a civil war in China, and it's historically accurate and everything. And I'll go through it in much more detail. I'll do a whole video on the China thing. But it was a game changer for us once we created the Warlord era for this game. And there's a card deck that goes along with it, and it's a lot of fun to play. Like you think of the Spanish Civil War on 36, only it's a little bit more involved than that. Like there's more territories, and there's more than two factions, right? Like the Warlords, even though like there's two sides in this, there's the nationalists and then the warlords. But the warlords, they also have these mandatory offensives, like I mentioned, for Britain, France, and Germany earlier. If they pull that card and they're not adjacent to a nationalist territory, then they have to attack another warlord. Right? So anyway, you'll get people lend-leasing into, the Allies can lend-lease to the nationalists, and the Central Powers can lend-lease to the warlords. And there's the capital is in Peking up there. That's worth a point, just just like all the other capitals are. But there will be 2 points that are available, either to the nationalists or to the warlords, depending on how many territories you take or don't take, right? So there's thresholds. And again, I'm not going to elaborate. That'll be something. This is just a brief overview. But so you could walk out of China with 3 points. That could be the difference between a win or a loss. And that's both sides can walk out of there with 3 points. Not at once. I'm just saying, if one side kicks the other side's ass in China, then they can get 3 points out of it. It's more likely that one side will get 2 points or 1 point, but probably 2 points. It'll probably be 2 points to nothing in China for one side or the other. Anyway, so that was a game changer for us, and that really helped out in bringing Asia into this conflict. I'll show you this briefly here. One of the things. Now this is an old one, right? This is not going to be the new one, but you look along the top there, and this is our IPP tracker. So it tells you what to do when you start a turn. Like if somebody is supposed to align that turn, if the fighters are supposed to be upgraded that turn, it tells you all along the way. You've got some markers to mark that you've done your mandatory offensive, right? And there's the turn order there. So and it'll be a little bit nicer than that thing. I think that the final art on that. But that's basically what our IPP tracker looks like. So another thing, let's take a look at some of these. So here's my French infantry box. So you've got your regular infantry, you've got your militia, you've got your colonial infantry. What are these? Oh, these are Foreign Legion. They don't really mean much in this game. I just like to put them in there. But here, like these are your elite units, right? These for the French, there's Zouaves, they're called, and they were from Northern Africa. So when the French build their elite unit, they have to build it in Northern Africa. They can't build it in their home country. And then you've got your trench fighters. So they're better on offense than a regular infantry, but not as good on defense, right? And then you have your naval infantry, which is the same as a marine, right? And of course there's the mountain infantry, and that's exactly the same as a mountain infantry in the 36 game. And the other thing about this game on the map, I should have showed you some of the map, but the map, we're using flag roundels. What you see on the 36 game to this point was they're like Air Force roundels, right? Like what you would see on wingtips of planes. But in this game, we're using the flags. Like here is the British ones. What do we got here? Yeah, they're basically the same as what I just showed you. Like they've got their trench fighters, right? Where's the... Oh yeah, here they are. So all of them, they just have an elite chip. So you don't need to buy specialist infantry for them, right? You can just get the chips and put your regular infantry on those. And then you got your militia and your colonial infantry. Anyway, let's get some of these other ones here. So then you got your armored trains, and Doug is. I just seen he had me looking for a better. I think he found one though, a better armored train. I think this was actually a World War II armored train, so he's getting another one for that. You got your cruisers, and what's that? Oh, this is a pre-dreadnought. And if you go on 3D printed like I have, there's tons of units that he has. That'd be a dreadnought. And your seaplanes. Factories are the same. You've got your 3 sizes of factories, although it is vastly different how you put units on the board in this game. And your fighters. Yeah, and I've been using these big cavalry pieces. I don't know if I like them or not, but I just thought I'd try it out. And camels. Love the camels. So camels, for instance, like you have manpower icons, and that's how you put infantry units and cavalry and camels on the board. Like you don't need a factory for those. What you need is a manpower icon, right? There's your observation balloon and your airship. And I got, oh, yeah, tanks. It's too bad the tanks didn't have a better role in the game, but again, like you couldn't just make them into something that they weren't, right? As much fun as that would be. And your heavy artillery. Anyway, let's set this aside. I want to show you something else. Okay, these are now one of the options. Like there's 3 aspects to this game. There's the prequel, the main game, and then there is the Russian Civil War. A lot of what's in this box here is for the Russian Civil War. Like, well, you know what? Let me just show you. I'll show you these pieces, and then I'll show you. So these are Ukrainians here, and I've got the Polish and the Finnish army, and then for the Mexican Revolution, there's the Federalists and the revolutionaries there. Anyway, and then there's the White Army for the Russians. So this is the Russian one, and this is the Red Army roundel. Now, that's not the same as the Russian roundel to begin the game, because it was the Tsar that was in charge of Russia before the revolution, right? And that's this roundel. And so once the revolution happens, well, that's then this is the former Russian armies of the Tsar. That would be the Russian flag, but you'll be fighting against the Soviets, and the Soviets will be the aggressor in that, of course, right? Like they will have the advantage. Petrograd will be your capital to begin the game, but once the Soviets take over, they move the capital to Moscow. One more thing I'd like to show you here. So here's a lot of the chips that you need for the game. The elite chips and the trench fighters and the naval infantry. We're using flag roundels, like I said. So what's that one? I think that's Romania, maybe? That's definitely Norway. There's Portugal. So yeah, love these roundels as opposed to the Air Force roundels. Let me get that computer back. Now, I am going to show you the map here, but this is not final art, but it'll give you a good view like the terrain is just, these are basically just placeholders for terrain. So you see these roundels. These are French colonial roundels. So in the French colonies, and you'll see, like, look at this one here, the symbol here is different than the symbol here. And you'll find that for, you know, like here, there's the symbol for that one. That one's different as well, right? This one's different than the other ones. And the same with the British ones, right? This is a British colonial roundel. This is a German colonial roundel. And what else we got here? There's a Belgian colonial roundel. There's a Portuguese one. So basically it's half the flag and then the symbol of that country there, right? There's another German one and another British one, Belgian. This would be an Italian colonial. Anyway, but then when you go to the nations, like every country, every territory in the home country has the French flag, not the French colonial flag, right? Same with Germany, right? They're all the German flag. And then there's the Austrian ones. Again, remember, this is not final art. Some of these have changed, and even some of the names have changed. One of the things I want to point out here, these symbols here, that's your manpower. So you cannot put more than one infantry class unit in this territory. Even if you have a factory there, you can't put more than one infantry class unit, because there was only so much manpower to go around, right? You know, you couldn't just make people out of nothing, right? And there you can see using the flags. Let's take a look at over here. Let's go down here. There we go. So there's different kind of neutrals as well. In the Arabian Peninsula here, you can see it's not just one big Saudi Arabia, right? There's a lot of different little kingdoms kind of thing. Those are all strict neutrals. So you can't influence these guys down here. You have to conquer them. You can't just influence them. A lot of the neutrals in the game you can just influence, right? There's the Dutch there. You know, like you could influence Siam maybe, but most of the countries you can influence. Some of them you can't. There's the Japanese flag on there. Anyway, different sea zones in this game. And the 36 game, the V4, it'll have the same sea zones and the same coastlines, but sorry, here, I'm just looking. Yeah, same sea zones and the same coastline, but the interiors might be different. Like here, it's probably the same, but Europe will be vastly different, right? Different colors and different territory names. See, like here, you look at, there's the British Union Jack for all the home country territories. Ireland has a colonial roundel there, right? Let's look over here. There's the Canadian one. But Labrador was not part of Canada back then. Labrador was, I guess they were calling it part of the home country here. But these are all Canadian. And then the Americans, they don't have colonial roundels because they didn't have colonies, right? Somebody asked that when we asked people to look over the map. They said, how come America doesn't have? Well, America didn't have colonies. They just showed up, and either you were a part of America or you weren't. It's your choice, right? And our choice, I guess. But I just love the flags on these ones. They're really cool. But don't, like, this map is not accurate right now. We've moved a lot of the islands, for instance. A lot of the borders have changed. Things have changed. This map is actually fairly old, but I think most of the roundels on it are correct. Like there's the Russian roundel to begin the game. Let's move over here. Petrograd. That's the capital of Russia to begin the game, and then again it moves to Moscow once the Soviets take over, right? But look here, see, you notice that, here, let's move this out a little bit more. So you see how Russia's a different color here? That's because it's the Ukraine. Remember I showed you a different Ukrainian army? So once the Russia collapses, then it collapses. There's all of a sudden there's the Ukraine and there's Poland there. That's why it's a different color. But yet it's Russian to begin with, right? But it's not. It's a little bit lighter color. And the same here with Finland. Finland is its own country at the beginning of the Russian Civil War, or yeah, the Russian Civil War. That's really a game within a game, that Russian Civil War. It's really quite involved. And it's a lot of fun too. Anyway, that's a bit of the map, or a bit of the way the map was anyway. It's not like that anymore. So, geez, this video's got to be going pretty long by now, right? Maybe I should cut it off here. But I wanted to show you some of the stuff and let you know how the progress is going. It's going really well. I encourage you to read what's on the website there and the game designer notes, just to see what the kind of process that we went through. It's been a really interesting process. The one who came up with the original concept of all the global war stuff was Will Henson, and him working along with Doug, who owns the company. They came up with the Global War series, and eventually, like, Will is working on a different game right now, and this game was passed off a few years ago to Robert Hatcher, and Robert brought me on board, and of course Morton has a bit to do with it as well, because a lot of the rules we had to sync up with the V4 rules, which Morton was developing, and everything goes through Doug. So like, everything has to be approved by him, right? So if he doesn't like something, then you got to change it, right? And that's good, because in that way, he's the one person that's in common with all the global war games, and there will be some consistency throughout the roster of games. And right now there's only one, and this is going to be the second one, and there will be several of them in the end, right? But Robert has worked really hard, and he's done the most amount of work on it. Like him and I, we could do a play test or something like that, and then I'm done. I go watch a movie, right? Not him. He's got to get to his computer, and he's got to document it all, and he's got to change the rules. He's got to write them, and he's done a phenomenal job. He's put in so many hours of work. I can't even imagine if you were to add up the number of hours of work. You've seen all the custom infantry and cavalry and stuff like that I have in my game here, and just to show my appreciation for him, how much work he's done. I sent him a box of like, every country had its own custom infantry and custom cavalry and custom camels, and and I know he appreciated that. But just, like, he deserves something out of that, and like, we all get some benefit out of it. Doug takes care of us pretty well, but I wanted to show him that he'd done a really good job, and so I did a little bit extra for him there, and I can't think of anybody that deserves it more. He's a really good guy. Anyway, let me just, last thing before we go, let's just go over here. Let's try to get that glare out of there. So there's Bob right there. Colonel Bob, I like to call him, Robert Hatcher. And then Doug up top, and Will Henson here, and then there's my ugly mug right there. That's what I'd look like if I had a World War I mustache. I showed that picture to my mom. She goes, "Who the hell's that guy?" "That's me, Mom." "Oh." Anyway, that's the main team right there, the four of us there, and a lot of other people helped, right? Like, we put out questions all the time, like, what do you think of this, or what do you think of that, and people chime in. But those are the four guys that did the most work on the game, and really proud to have been a part of it, and it will be out very soon. Like I said, it's in the production phase now. The map should be done by now, but Doug just won't let it go. No, there's got to be one more mistake. He just keeps looking and looking, and he keeps finding them. So good for him. Yeah, everything is pretty much designed, and we've put it out to you to look at and to discuss and to give us feedback, and then we'll make final changes. Don't print off anything in nice form. Like, it's okay if you want to print it off to read it, but the stuff that's on there is going to change as well. I've looked at it on the website, and I know there's a couple of things that I see that are going to be changed. So so don't think that that's all final, but you can see how close it's getting. Most of the art is done. Most of everything is done. We've got 2 card decks. They're done. They just need to be printed. As far as plastic pieces, though, man, it's been tough, like with this pandemic and problems with China to do with the pandemic. We had to get somebody else. We brought somebody else on board just recently, and so the plastic's going to be late, but the game will be out there. You can play with any pieces, though. You can see, like, I've got a full game. That's a more expensive way to go, but like, you could even play with your World War II pieces until the other ones come out, if that's what you want to do. Anyway, that's all I got for you today, though, folks. I just I hadn't made a video in a long time. That's probably why I'm rambling on so much. I miss you all. I know a couple of you miss me because I get some messages once in a while asking if I'm still alive, and I appreciate those messages. So thank you, and thanks for keeping me in your thoughts. And I'll see you guys at the Summer Offensive next month. We'll be doing videos then, and we'll be having our friends come up, Panzer King and I, and we're going to have a great time there. So watch for that next month. And hopefully, like, I was hoping to have this game by then, but I don't know. We'll see, right? That's we'll see how fast all that stuff can get printed off. But whether or not it's here by then, it'll be here soon. I know that for sure. Anyway, thanks for joining me today, though. So take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.